Hello, everyone. So glad to see you this morning. Hey, Tanya, thank you so much for joining. Good morning. It's a tad bit early where you are. Definitely thank you for being a trooper.
All good, all good. Thanks for having me. Very excited to have this talk.
Yeah, talking about something super exciting. Frameworks, compliance. Woohoo! Everybody needs to
Everyone's
have an
favorite topic.
extra cup of coffee. For sure. Well, very nice. Well, we're going to give folks just a few more seconds to gather, and then we're just going to jump right into this. Thank you so much, everyone who's here and commitment to show up to the live event, but also in this early morning. Well, awesome. I think we're just going to get going. Thank you so much for everybody attending. Tanya, thank you so much for being present. We're going to have a very lively discussion today about something that maybe some people don't think is very lively, but we sure like it. We definitely
Yes.
want your questions. Put them in the Q&A. If it makes sense as we're talking, we'll pick them up as we go. You all know what we're here to talk about since you registered. Thank you so much for that. And so let's jump right into this. So today our topic is choosing the right cybersecurity framework, which that is the non-sexy side of cybersecurity. That is the reality. But this work matters like a lot. There's a lot of really important reasons why this work is so important and why choosing the right framework. Ultimately, we're trying to protect our companies, protect data, protect people, align with the business. There's so much value to this. Tanya, you work in this, I believe, every day. What are your thoughts about the importance of this? You think you're wasting your time?
Absolutely not. I mean, it can be daunting. It's a kind of daunting process to, think about starting, but it's absolutely worth it. You definitely do get your returns on your investment, so definitely recommend, diving into this and investing the time.
Yeah, I think if you do it right, you get your ROI, but I bet you can tell stories of cases where it's not done right and really was the ROI achieved, was the return on investment achieved.
Sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
very valid point. Okay, so there's a lot of frameworks. There's a lot. Like hardly a week goes by, honestly, and I don't get random question from one of our clients. Hey, have you ever heard of this? Or hey, have you ever heard of this? What do I need to do with this? It's just there's a lot of noise out there. Cybersecurity, of course, is incredibly important across our planet. Every country seems like they're adopting their own thing. There's hundreds of frameworks and regulatory. Oh my gosh, it can just be so confusing. Tanya, how do you kind of help sift through some of this noise?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of noise for sure. I think there's a lot of understanding that the frameworks do kind of build on themselves. So it's not like each framework is like its own separate entity that has no overlap with the rest. So kind of understanding where the similarities lie, where they're kind of used as inspiration for other frameworks, and then just keeping track of updates to the new versions of frameworks, what those mean to your org. Are they straight up a new iteration, or is it just something that was it's just a bit more clear than it was before? So yeah.
Those are really great points. And you brought up something, none of these are, they're not mutually exclusive from each other. The new ones aren't really new entirely. You brought up an excellent point. They're a lot of times birthed out of something else. Like quite a few of the frameworks or regulatory actually are very aligned to ISO, for example. And so there's that alignment. And so then when you start looking across at the different frameworks, you definitely see those similarities. So thank you for that. That's a very valid point that it's not 100 different frameworks, 100 different
Exactly.
regulatory. There's so much overlap and
So
similarity.
much.
So much, but they do kind of all have their nuances. So let's talk about that. They're not all created equal. They're so different. For example, there's a few there listed on the screen. SOC 2 is very much birthed out of customer assurance and birthed out of controls being owned and being able to be outsourced to a third party company. And the mechanism of SOC 2 was to help validate and audit those controls. It was never intended to be an end-to-end security program. So when a company implements SOC 2 and thinks, oh, okay, we're secure, they missed the whole point. That was never the point of that particular instrument. It had a different objective. Great stuff. At its design, it's a great instrument. How it's implemented and shortcut in the world is very unfortunate because that's not its intent. But you kind of have to understand the nuances. PCI, very prescriptive framework, but it was birthed for specifically cardholder data, credit cards. And so that is what it applies to. Again, not intending to be a full end-to-end program. But Tanya, you do a lot of ISO work. How is ISO different, for example?
ISO, as compared to SOC 2 or PCI, for example, is pretty comprehensive. And I mean, I really enjoy working with ISO. What it's not, though, is, super technical. It makes sure that you have a lot of documentation, a lot of reporting, that you have, it's more that kind of governance and risk piece of it. But it's not kind of the nitty gritty, your 2FA, your granular access controls. It's definitely more of a general overview, and it's great to have in place, but it is definitely not a standalone framework that will get you a full-fledged program.
Yeah, that's really interesting nuances there. And I think that takes us straight into this next one is the checkbox compliance. I remember several dialogues with you. Well, that's actually not required from ISO, but it is best practice. And so
Yes.
in steering our clients in the right way, well, you really should do this because this is best practice and this is going to mitigate risk. You also said one of my favorite words, risk. And so all of these frameworks, all of this regulatory, its intent is to mitigate risk. Its intent is to protect data and people, and we must never forget that. So unfortunately, we see a lot of this checkbox compliance, like a lot. And so basically, okay, what does it say? Oh, here's the 10 things I have to go do. Okay, I'll go do that with no consideration for the overall cyber program, no consideration for how this actually does mitigate risk and what makes sense or what doesn't make sense for your organization. Tanya, you see a lot of this. What's your thoughts on the common pitfall of checkbox compliance?
I mean, it's very cursory. I've been in multiple kind of risk assessment sessions where going over, what sort of mitigations are around a certain risk. And risk owners often ask, like, well, what's the bare minimum that I have to do to pass audit?
Yep.
And that's just honestly completely aside from the actual risk. That's
Yep.
like, it's a decent question in its own kind of field, but it is not actually a valid question for how is the risk being remediated. So it's easy to fall into just like what is that like bare minimum bar that we have to meet, but that's just not going to do you or the organization any good. It might make it easier to pass your audit, but that's about it. You're not actually improving where you stand.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. It makes me think back to school. If we could get a copy of the exam and knew what we had to study for them, unfortunately we all did it because we really didn't have a desire to learn the material. We're just trying to get through school and do what we're told to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really unfortunate that that attitude has crept into this because mitigating risk and keeping data and people and companies ultimately safe, that really is the goal, not passing the test. The passing the test comes after you've actually done what you should be doing. And so there's definitely a mindset shift that needs to happen. How widespread would you say this from your perspective, Tanya? Because you work with a lot of companies.
I would say it's quite widespread. I would say majority of companies at least start from this angle. Do they have the opportunity to mature and kind of shift their perspective towards more like what is the actual mitigation that we need to look at, or what are the steps that we need to do to actually mature and address the risks that we have in place. Yes, people do go down that route eventually, but I think overall, it's pretty common to have this kind of checkbox approach. Um, yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And you mentioned the starting point. And that's not awful, right? Like you got to
Mhm.
start somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if a company has, they don't even know which end is up, and they start at this, what's it going to take to pass? That's okay.
Mhm.
The problem is to get stuck there and you find yourself being a very large organization and year over year and you're still doing it to that bar. That's miss the whole point of this. And so
Exactly.
thank you for your insight there. This next one, we see a lot of these common pitfalls as well. This pitfall as well. That, okay, I got it. I passed. I'm done now. What's wrong with
Exactly.
that statement, Tanya?
It's never over. It would be nice if you could just kind of, okay, we did it. We're good now. And you are good. You are in a better place for sure. But the work isn't over. You have to keep going with what you're doing and keep building on what you've done. So just that continuous improvement, it's daunting. It can be, um, kind of intimidating to think about, budget or resources or whatnot that's needed to kind of keep that sustainability going, but it does absolutely pay off.
Yeah. Yeah, risk is mitigated every day. I know there's a, kind of a thing that we do risk assessment at least annually, and it should be at least annually. But how often is risk mitigated, Tanya? Every
Right.
day, every day. And so this
Mhm.
comes to the sustainability aspect. There's things that are operating as event driven controls, mitigating risk, like a termination that needs to happen within a time. And then there's daily, there's weekly, there's monthly, there's all of the frequencies. And so it's really how are you going to sustain what you build? And a lot of companies don't think about that. And that's a reality because if you build it very checkbox and very siloed in the beginning, you've now compromised your sustainability when you get to that point.
Mhm.
So last common pitfall we see is aligning to the business goals. So a lot of times there's a disconnect between what happens in IT or what happens in cybersecurity from what the business is actually trying to do. And that's unfortunate because IT and cyber both are here to support the business ultimately. And so we should very much align to what the business goals are. If the business goal is growth into a particular sector, like we want to start serving large hospitals, well, you're probably going to need to look at high trust. And that's how, and build making sure that your cyber program includes those requirements of that. If you're looking to break into banking, financial services, there's going to be other instruments there. And so there's it, but the whole point is part of the design of this is the cyber program should support the business. And I think we're going to unpack this a little bit more. Tanya, any thoughts, additional thoughts on that pitfall?
Yeah, I mean, I think what tends to lead to this pitfall is a kind of a lack of communication. So, there may be goals that are set up, from upper management, but are they effectively communicated to those, lower middle levels? Not always. Like, is there, the kind of backstory as to why this is important, why the business is pursuing this? I think that gives people a lot of drive towards meeting those goals versus, falling back into the checkbox. So we're just doing this to,
Yeah.
say that we did it.
Yeah, and that's really good. It works the other way too. Then you got cyber people out there sometimes that aren't very communicative the other way, to your point. And that's really important as well. Or maybe they are communicating, but maybe they're doing it in a very confrontational, not a risk language that executives can really truly understand. And so I think that communication is a huge big key for that pitfalls. So much of what we do is people change management, and communication is a big piece of that. And anybody who's going to really excel in this space is just going to have to be good at people change management, which very much, Tanya, excellent point, the communication aspect. Okay, so what should you do? How do you make this decision? There's all these frameworks. It's very confusing. There's pitfalls, there's noise. It's overwhelming. So how should you go about unpacking this? Well, the first one is customer demands. I tell this all the time to companies. Should I do this? Should I do this? Should I do this? Should I do this? Okay. The reality is it's a fixed world. It's fixed time, it's fixed budget, it's fixed resources, all of the above. So you got to pick your battles, so to speak. And so customer demands is a great way to do this. What are your clients asking you for? Are they asking you for SOC 2? Then you should probably get SOC 2 because now it's tied directly to revenue. And much of this in the cybersecurity world, especially from a framework standpoint, is tied directly to revenue. Are they asking you for high trust? That's a big commitment framework to go out and do. It's expensive to get it up front. It's expensive to maintain it every every year. But if it's tied to revenue, then you do it. So that's really huge. This is also where it goes back to aligning to the business. If next year we want to break into a new segment or we want to grow to something different, like Dora, we're doing a fair amount of Dora right now, which is coming out of Europe, financial services industry. And so then you would have to be mindful of regulation like that. Tanya?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we all are aware, at least I think, of the dreaded security questionnaire.
Oh,
And looking at what they're asking, are they asking you for a certain type of report on there that would, make answering that a lot easier. So kind of getting these, certifications based off of customer demands is just going to make that process a lot easier too.
yeah, no, that's a really good point. That's an excellent point. Okay, so what else should you consider? Ah, business goals. Wow, that doesn't sound very exciting. What do you think about this, Tanya? Why is this important?
I mean, you've mentioned it, are we going into a new sector? Is there like a new company that's being acquired that then pushes the larger org into that new sector, new market? So are we, going and getting set up in Europe, for example, where we have to start thinking about DORA, GDPR, that type of stuff?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. That last bullet too, we see that too. Companies who want to go
Yes.
public, yeah, they start to get that extra scrutiny. Customers is definitely a source of scrutiny. That's what you already brought up with the questionnaires. So definitely there's that
Mhm.
aspect. But then there can also be other types of scrutiny, like if you have an owner that, hey, how are we doing on cybersecurity? And so we'll see companies aligned to NIST-CSF, for example, is just kind of a nice broad intending to be broad spectrum security program, and so there can be pressure from that as well. The point is, again, cyber and tech is to align to the goals of the business, and so the cybersecurity strategic plan. How many times do you see that, Tanya? How many times do you see a company actually provide a cybersecurity strategic plan 1, 3 or 5 years out?
I would love to say
Uh,
that I've seen one.
Woo! I don't see it very often either. But those,
Yeah, that would
those
be a good day.
that would be a great day.
Yes.
Yes, I would be pleasantly surprised every time I see one of those. But the point is, those are the mechanism to align to the business. And most companies are doing it, but they're doing it more informally, not so much like formally with a plan. But there is a reason to obviously do that plan. And then your frameworks would align directly into that plan because where is the business going 1, 3, 5 years out? What is our cybersecurity strategy that aligns and supports that? And then the framework strategy could sit right alongside that. So it's very, very important. I know it feels kind of textbooky, but it's very important that those align together. Okay, current state. So what should we think about with current state? Most companies are not starting from zero. So why is this important?
Yeah, it can kind of feel sometimes like you're starting from zero, but in most cases you're not. You have some amount of controls that you have in place, some amount of processes. Are they, extensively documented? Maybe not. But you do have some amount in place. So just knowing kind of where you stand at the current moment, kind of taking inventory of what you have going on, that'll really allow you to kind of contextualize those different frameworks, kind of see where they make sense in regards to what you're doing, what you need to do. And then that'll allow you to, yeah, to just kind of look at what you need to do to get to a more mature place.
Yeah, you're talking about it, and it's making me think, how many times we see these things birth in silos. Oh, we've got to go, oh, they need SOC 2. We go do a SOC 2. Oh, crap, they need ISO now. We go do ISO. And it just
Hmm.
makes things kind of birth and they
Yes.
don't really come together. And then that affects sustainability to be able to really sustain these things in any sort of quality way. But it also affects efficiency. And we see a lot of that, Tanya. I know you can, probably chuckle at some of the stories, but I mean, it's just this horrible inefficiency, and it just becomes so burdensome and so overwhelming for companies, understandably. And it's all about, the end state is pulling all of this together as a single program. And so this current state is very much a part of that, right? Look
Mhm.
at what you have. You don't have nothing, and then start to build it. And whatever you have, as you build on top of that. And so it's really important this is a really important one to make sure that ultimately you're crafting something that comes together as a single program, not just this and this and this. So
Exactly.
really good points. Okay, upcoming changes. This stuff never changes. It's set it and forget it. You get it done. It's
Mhm.
just gonna go. You don't have to worry about it. You can automate everything.
Absolutely.
Is there anything wrong with what I just said, Tanya?
No, that's
Oh,
exactly
it's
it.
all
It's
exactly
so
what it
easy.
is. We're done.
Yep.
It's so easy.
Yep. No, things are always changing. Like we were talking about earlier, you could run into acquisitions, mergers. We've got new markets. We've got new variants of frameworks, new frameworks entirely. Um, and, like we discussed, Europe brings GDPR, DORA. So changes galore ultimately.
Oh yeah, the changes are endless. The frameworks change, they have newer versions, regulation changes. But then I think about like HIPAA. Oh my gosh, it's so behind, but it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
It's finally coming. But then if you look at some of the stuff that's coming, it's really aligned to best practice. But yeah, I mean, there's external changes, there's internal changes. Your business changes, your customer demands changes, the markets that you want to go in, your business goals change, your ownership changes, all those are internal changes that can affect this. But then there's also external changes that can affect this as well. And while we're talking, this stuff is changing. That is the
True.
reality. So you have to be really good at like staying up to date with what's changed, because the reality is, if your program, like when we work with companies, then year over year their SOC 2, for example, looks exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're not really maturing. You're not really looking at this. I can tell you that because the world has changed. Or Tanya, I just thought of this. Oh, we don't look at our handbook every year because it hasn't changed in the last 6 years. That's not even possible,
It's not
because
possible.
social media has changed,
COVID.
AI has changed,
Yeah.
COVID has changed. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's not
that's one
even
of the major changes that
possible.
I think of in the past few years.
Right.
Yeah.
And your main mechanism for communicating with your employee body, yeah, it needs to be looked at least annually. And no, I mean, there might be a year here or there that there's not a lot of changes, but the reality is the world does change all the
Yeah.
time.
All
And
the
so
time.
all the time. So that definitely has to be part of your program. Okay, what's next? Oh, this is one near and dear to my heart right here. So security maturity. This one is really important because there's a tolerance for maturity that an organization has. And it's anywhere from check the box to I want to do the right thing, and all these flavors in between. And we hear both ends of the spectrum and all the flavors all the time. And so there's a maturity tolerance of the organization that security should absolutely align to. If it's low, then that's part of security's job, and these frameworks can be a huge help for that, is to help advance that maturity. So year over year we're making this thing look better, it's more comprehensive, it's monitored better, it's reported better, potentially aligning to more frameworks are great because it's not one person saying, hey, this is what it should be. It's, I looked at this thing, whatever the thing is, and it says we should do these things. So that means it's something bigger than just one person to say, hey, there's a there's a group of people at least that have decided these are really important things. So we should leverage this for what makes sense for our business. So it's really a great
Exactly.
opportunity to amp up the maturity if you don't approach it with the checkbox mindset. What else, Tanya?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of building on that, a lot of the frameworks, I mean, I would say the majority of the frameworks do allow a good amount of creativity on how you implement them.
Yeah.
So none of, I mean, very few of the frameworks are super, super prescriptive. Here's step one, two, three, exactly how you have to do it. Here's the general requirement, and then how you go about doing that is how it, works and kind of fits into your org. So you do have that kind of leeway to decide how to implement it best. And then within that, you can build in your kind of maturity steps. Okay, this year we're taking a very kind of basic approach to meeting this requirement. Next year, let's add a new component that does like push us more towards maturity within the same requirement. And just they allow you to build upon past iterations.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And the way it's done is with risk. And that's
Mhm.
often missed. Risk and compliance are so often disconnected in application in the world. And when we work with companies, controls mitigate risk. Like they're one thing. And the whole point of cyber is to control risk in the organization. And controls are the way to do that. And frameworks are the way to help with mature controls. Like it all fits together. These are not individual activities. You don't do a one time a year risk assessment and put it up on the shelf and let's not look at it again for a year. No, they all come together, exactly what you just said. And so that's what we see missing a lot in the world. But it's all risk. You mentioned the creative application because risk is the missing variable that allows you to creatively solution for what makes
Mhm.
sense to your business. We'll work
Absolutely.
with businesses that have the highest level of CUI coming out of the CMMC space, but even like PHI or PII, so date of birth, social security numbers, health information, data that needs to absolutely be guarded. Then we'll work with other companies that they don't have any of that. They're B2B and they just have confidential data. Confidential data is important, but automatically their risk posture is different, very different between the two because the second company just doesn't even have the same level of data and protection needed over here. This could be embarrassing. This could be costly. This could be, really confidential data that they don't want to lose or, lose the trust of their customers, but it's a different ball game. And so most of the frameworks are designed to for that approach and risk is the variable. But Tanya, you said it right at the top. When I just push that out and just try to check, 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 I've missed the whole point of this thing. And I'm basically just doing a busy exercise that's not actually doing the job it was intended to do. Really, really great point. Here's a question that I think is kind of interesting. What should we do first if I feel like I'm taking an exam. What should you do first? When I took the CISP, that question drove me crazy. What should we do first if we realize mid-implementation that the chosen framework no longer fits? Uh-oh.
Mhm.
So you get partway through on this thing and then you're like, oh, no, no, no. This is not the right one. Or it's not that it wouldn't be the right one. Maybe we thought, SOC 2 was it. I'm just making this up. But then maybe we got the biggest deal potential of our life, and then all of a sudden, poosh, they need ISO tomorrow. So
Sure.
how would you navigate that, Tanya?
Yeah, I mean, as far as kind of the how did we end up with the wrong framework, I would analyze, where did the initial framework come from? Like, was that from customer expectations,
Yeah.
or customer demands? As far as then, pivoting to a new framework, we're going to touch on it in a bit, but doing a mapping exercise to figure out, okay, so the work that you've done so far isn't in vain. These
Yep.
frameworks do have connections to each other. To have one framework that's completely isolated, no overlap in the Venn diagram from the other is super, super rare. So figuring out what that overlap is so that you can reuse the work that you've already done, that's not in vain, you can just keep building on that. So fairly easy to pivot if you do a solid mapping exercise and figure out kind of where everything stacks up.
Yeah, that's part of why I like you so much because that's exactly what I was thinking is you have not that's not throwaway work by any stretch.
Mm-mm.
It probably overlaps very much into the new and just what she said, what would be that alignment. And then I would add to that as well, that original choice, and you said it, why did we make the original choice? It's probably going to circle back around in all reality.
Yeah.
So it's just part of the greater strategy. So really great question. Thank you. Okay, back to this. So the final thing that you should consider is, oh, the lovely ROI, return on investment. Wait a minute. I thought this was all like expense and overhead and obnoxious, burdensome money. Um, No, that's not what this is at all. You mean I can actually get a return on this investment? Get out. What do you think, Tanya? Can this actually be achieved?
Yes, I absolutely, absolutely. If I think, especially just treating it as a check the box exercise that you go through every year, that is
There's no
very
return.
much verging on wasting your time and money.
Yep.
Because you're really not getting much out of that.
Yep.
You check the box, but that's about it. But you're not just checking that at no expense to the org. You're taking time and resources to do that. So actually investing the effort and the resources, the time to really fully dive in, see how this really fits into the org as a whole, getting that full alignment. Sherry said risks, having that risk mitigation, knowledge of the controls that you have in place, how effective they are, how they align to the frameworks and your customer demands. We talked about questionnaires, how fun those are to answer. Imagine
Mhm.
just being able to answer those confidently. Here's your report, all of that.
Yep.
It does make your life and just organizational reputation
Yep.
a lot better.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I mean, if doing this work can save embarrassment or save data loss, there's your investment right there. Now, you may not necessarily know that per se. And it may be hard to measure that, but that's the name of the game. But then you mentioned something way more practical, which is awesome, is tied to revenue. Imagine if you've built and run this that it can actually be sustained. One, you're able to answer out of it the questionnaires, which builds customer trust, helps the organization land revenue. Um, and that's awesome. And then if you can answer the questionnaires with integrity, now you're not introducing more risk, which unfortunately a lot of companies do that. They'll hire the intern or, copy paste and whatever, that's good enough. But there's incredible liability to how those questionnaires are answered. And so there's return on investment right there. But then you said something else about efficiency. If you can build this stuff to efficiently run it, and sustain it so there's not all this ridiculous waste. And unfortunately, we see the waste all the time. We see the lure of, oh, this is cheap, so this will get me what I need. Oh, that becomes
It's not.
you're shaking
It's
your head.
not.
That becomes throwaway money. That becomes 100% wasted money, unfortunately, versus there's a right way to do this that can really be sustained. And so, if you can really work on that efficiency in the process, the design, and yes, the automation, we see that a lot as well. Companies want to automate everything. Some of this can be automated, but a vast majority of it is people and process. What are breaches almost always tied to? People.
Right.
So people and process
Honestly.
are the part that we see where companies really struggle with this. But if you can get this right, there's an incredible return on investment of this stuff. Like things we can actually see, like protecting the org, that's a return right there. But we may not necessarily know that because we might have avoided something that we didn't know we avoided. But that's a
Right.
good thing.
Right.
But then on the other side, there's this efficiency and there's this capture of revenue. Those are incredible returns on investment that we can actually measure. So really, really great point. And that's the way it should be done. Like, why would you, why, if you're just trying to check a box, like just don't do anything. You're actually introducing more risk into the organization. Like, go after the return on investment. I'm a big ROI person.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yep. Let's take this to kind of a practical level. And so now, what do they do? Oh, and somebody asked a good question. If multiple frameworks seem relevant to the industry, is it better to pick one or pursue the multi-framework right from the start? What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's related back to the initial question. Is Are the two frameworks equal in terms of like customer demands? Is it, are we breaking even there? Is one more important, one being asked for more? In which case, you could lean towards the one. But really, if it is a matter of there are multiple frameworks that customers are asking for, excuse me, it would be really beneficial to do that analysis of mapping to see, where's the overlap, how doable would it be to do both, and implement both frameworks at the same time. Or, you could do that mapping exercise and realize that there's not all that much overlap, in which case you need to prioritize the one, figure out which one is more important to the org and its clients at the time, and then down the road, work on incorporating the second one.
Yeah, that's great feedback. I think of it a timing exercise.
Mhm.
If it takes, again, making this up, if it takes 3 months to adopt one and 4 months to adopt both, if you have the 4 months, do it, because it's going to be more efficient to go after both. Because just to what you said, you're going to work to align them together.
Yep.
However, if it takes three months to adopt one and 8 months to adopt two, probably makes sense to pit stop through the one, and then, to your point, look for the overlap and come up with the plan and the prioritization to get the second one. But yeah, that's a really great question. The other thing I would say is don't take on too much. I've we work with companies that they can't operate 10 controls properly. And they're like, oh, we need 1,000. No, just do 10. Like, just get 10 right, because their problem is people and process. And so if you can get 10 right and you can develop the process, then you can get 20 right, then you can get 100 right, and you can keep building your program. So that's the other caution I would say is, depending on the culture of the organization, if the culture is such that, yeah, we have a hard time operating 10 controls, then I would just focus on one, just because that's all people can handle. And so then that becomes the people change management aspect. But if the culture is such that, no, I think we can do this and people are pretty good at following through, then maybe you go for it. But I think that's kind of a case by case basis.
Agreed.
So let's talk about, okay, so the mechanics of an actual like framework adoption. So picked my framework, it's whatever it is. I probably have other stuff. So but now I need to like adopt this thing. So what are the general steps? Tanya, you want to just kind of high level, like around the wheel here?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
So, we talked about it earlier, figuring out where you currently stand. Be honest with yourself. Where do you land? From there, choosing your framework based off of, all the different factors that we talked about, looking at, a plan to assess your current stance against that framework. What are you gonna ask for? What kind of controls from that framework are you gonna look to have in place? Once you have kind of that selection, that scope in place, you can go ahead and, do your assessment, see where things stand in comparison, work on that remediation that comes out of that assessment, work that into the processes that they apply to, whatever, again, scope is important. Um, and then kind of work to see how that implementation is going, monitor the implementation, make sure that, it's going as planned. Reporting is a huge one. You want to make sure that you are communicating this to whatever stakeholders are applicable. Not being afraid to report bad news. If it's going well, great. If it's not, then that's equally as important to communicate. If you're doing an assessment, you're trying to get this framework in place and everything's, hunky dory, good to go, then is that really all that effective? Are you really looking into what it takes and what you have in place? So having that direct and honest reporting is very, very crucial. Um, and just kind of continuing that cycle. So then based out of those findings, what do you have left to do? Just go back through this. It's an iterative process. Like we said earlier, it's never over. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you. And it's funny, I'm chuckling because when you got to monitor and reporting and improvement, that's where companies generally don't do great at those things. It's like you implement controls. That's great. That's the framework adoption. Yep, this is what we need to do. We've designed it, we've implemented. Susie's going to do what she needs to do, whoever Susie is. Great. But then, are we monitoring that Susie's doing what she's supposed to be doing? And
Mhm.
especially if it's a high risk control, a control tied to risk. So again, this is where these are not done in silos. Even frameworks, compliance are in place to mitigate risk. Like we can never forget that. And so if Susie knows what she's supposed to be doing today, is she doing it next month? Is she doing it 3 months from now? Is she even still with the organization and nobody else picked it up? Right. You're laughing because you've seen
Yeah.
that, Tanya.
Uh-huh.
Yep. Oh, yeah. So and so did that. Whoops. They left six
Oh.
months ago. Oh, fantastic. That just tells me nobody's monitoring your risk posture and nobody's monitoring your compliance program, unfortunately. And so monitoring is huge, and companies aren't kind of just generically across the board not great at it. And so monitoring is every day. What controls need are we looking at weekly, monthly, twice a year, quarterly, whatever it is, but you make those decisions and you monitor. Then you report. I love that you brought that up. Reporting is huge. Again, companies don't do great at this, but reporting needs to be consistent and it needs to be at the right level. And so this is where, either reporting doesn't happen or it happens so detailed and so cryptic that executives don't even know what to do with it. So they ignore it. So then people get frustrated and stop doing it. So it's definitely, this is the art side of what we do. There's a lot of art, even in frameworks, honestly, and this is one of the arts. It's not all just science because how you report is critically important. And then Tanya, I love what you brought up. Like, it's not always good news. Like, how can you expect executives to action on something they need to action on if they think everything is great? Like, come on.
Right. Mhm.
We see that. We see companies go and get these checkbox audits, and then the security people go to their executives and go, "Oh my gosh, we're in such dire straits. We need this and this and this." And they're like, "That makes no sense to me. We just passed the audit." Okay, well, you just shot yourself in the foot by doing this checkbox audit because now you can't get any budget, any funding,
Mhm.
any understanding of why you're in this critical risk posture because, oh, we passed the audit. And we see that. That is hardcore real stuff. And so that reporting is very important. Yeah, we may have been successful with our SOC 2 audit, for example, but again, SOC 2 is not intended to be a full end-to-end cyber program executive, number one. So don't rely upon that to understand really how the organization is protected. And then, oh, by the way, here's the metrics that I've told you repeatedly of why we have issues, but you have to be monitoring to do that. And then the last one is improve. And so if you monitor and you report, then you know what to improve. We work with companies all the time. They don't know what to improve. They're like, what do I improve? Well, because you're not monitoring and you're not reporting. So you don't know what to improve. But when you have metrics that tell a story, then you see in those metrics, this is what needs to improve. And that is the cycle. And then, as we've talked about already, this stuff is not set it and forget it. New frameworks will come on the scene. And so this just continues. And then you plan and assess the next one. You integrate it into what you already have. You design it, you monitor, you blah, blah, blah. You just keep going the wheel around and round until you get dizzy. Thank
Mhm.
you. So let's go down a little bit into this. So let's talk about the actual assessment. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. So again, figure out what framework you're trying to pursue. Get the requirements. Generally, the requirements will be readily available through some sort of public resource, and compare that against what you're doing. So again, take inventory of the controls you have in place, processes you do, and you can do interviews with key stakeholders, control owners, risk owners, all of that, if those are identified, but the right folks. And you can do these interviews, but you don't want to completely rely on interviews alone, because people can, have tribal knowledge, they think that a process is being done this way. You talk to somebody else, it's actually being done a different way. So validating with actual evidence, screenshots, a walkthrough, what have you, will really kind of reinforce that picture of where you currently stand and being able to compare against a framework. Frameworks can be huge. They can have a ton of requirements, so it's kind of easy to get lost. So we recommend kind of looking at various domains, so access control, vulnerability management. Don't get too overwhelmed with the nitty gritty of each domain. Just kind of look at a high level. What is it asking for? What am I doing?
Yeah. No, that's really good. I like what you were talking about with the evidence. we've seen it many, many times. I say trust but verify. It's great. We can sit down. It happens. Talk to people. Oh yeah, we do that. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Do oh, of course we do all of that. And then we inspect the evidence. It's not followed all the way through. It's not documented appropriately. It's not tied back to this other thing. It's not communicated, these other aspects. And so thank you, Tanya, for bringing that up, that you can absolutely start with interview style, and that can be part of it, and maybe even your first iteration. But at some point, you got to look at all the evidence. So, like when we do readiness assessments or gap assessments for companies, it's always evidence based for this reason. And so that is really important. And then on your complexity thing, we see it all the time where this is a discipline, right? Cybersecurity is a discipline. Understanding this stuff is a discipline. And so, unfortunately, a lot of times we see that poor security person, oh, you're not doing anything extra. You got extra time right here. Just do this too. Talk to them all the time. And so, if you're one of those, I feel it for you because this is a whole nother job, basically. And so, we see it a lot of times where they work to solution and just the sheer desperation of just trying to get this stuff done, and they miss the mark of like what the requirement actually is. And we see that a fair amount. So these frameworks are complex. They have a lot of details, and depending on which one it is, you really have to dive into that. And so just be mindful of that and get the help that you need to really help you unpack it when you get to that point. Okay, we talked about this. Definitely don't start from zero. Use what you already have. Very important. You don't have nothing. It's rare that an organization has absolutely nothing. So you want to leverage and pull from as much of what you have that you can reuse. If you have other audits, for other frameworks, or you've had other assessments done for other frameworks, definitely start there and then crosswalk that into the new framework. Tanya, you want to talk a little bit about, the mechanics of how you crosswalk in a case like that? Like what
Yeah,
you
for
would
sure.
actually do?
Yeah, so the SCF, the Secure Controls Framework, is a excellent resource for crosswalking. There are well over 1,000 SCF controls, and those align to basically all the frameworks that you can imagine. So using the SCF is the best way, in my opinion, to crosswalk because you can basically select the two or however many frameworks that you're working with, determine which SCF controls fall into those frameworks, see where the overlap is, see where the kind of the individual ones are, and that will allow you to kind of get a better idea of just the amount of controls that you need in order to attain however many frameworks you're looking for. So much more straightforward than trying to compare cryptic language of requirement from framework one, cryptic language of framework two. So yeah, just
Yeah.
an easy way to kind of look at it.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm sure you will echo this. One caution about SCF is it does tend to be very high bar maturity, which is
Yes.
great if you if you have the resources to do that in your company. And so a lot of times there's the control is still there, and obviously this is what we do all day every day. So the control is still there, but then it's really tempering it with an understanding of, okay, what is best practice, and not trying to dumb it down to check the box, but what is best practice, that maybe this is kind of really pie in the sky above and beyond, and again making this a journey, starting at a good healthy place and then building upon that. And then what are the nuances of the framework? Like for example, SOC 2 is very nuanced about approvals, communication, to be able to see those written down. Other frameworks not so much. And so you really want to understand the nuances of the particular framework, because one control could satisfy five different frameworks, but each of those
Mhm.
frameworks very likely has its own little nuance. And then I have to do a little plug here about Chat GPT, because we're, seeing a lot of people are using that. And it is a really helpful way to kind of unpack some of this stuff. But just word of caution, it's not taking over the world anytime soon. It does not get things correct. It can do a crosswalk, for sure, like very quickly, But again, that's one framework to two frameworks. We work with companies that have 5 and 10 frameworks in
Right.
regulatory, and then it gets very complex and very complicated very quickly. And there's still all the nuances of that. So again, caution to ChatGPT as a resource, just like Google search engine has been a resource for many years. Books, if anybody remembers those before that, Dewey Decimal System, all that crazy stuff. The world is just getting faster and more accessible. But so use the resources that you have, but be cautious that yes, it can do this work, but you still have to implement it. You still have to design it appropriately for your company. You still have to, oh my gosh, get people to adopt it. So I would be cautious of that as well. And then on here too, we've got vendor questionnaires. There's a lot of good information in there you can pull. So basically you just pull from the resources that are already in place. And then just checking your own work can be biased. We see it all the time. We talk to companies all the time. Oh, yeah, we're good. This is all good. And then we start digging in. It's not where it needs to be. And so, shameless plug here, but an independent third party assessment really is key once you get to the point where you're like, okay, I think we got this, but now we really need to have somebody else, not my buddy across the aisle here. Um, Judge my test, but somebody that's actually going to come in here with a critical eye. So that is really important. Okay, mapping. We've talked about mapping. We've talked about crosswalking. What would you add, Tanya?
Yeah, so just to kind of add a bit more on the SCF, I mentioned that it's an easy way to crosswalk. It's easier. I just wanted to clarify. Um, the SCF controls are vague. So it does take an amount of analysis, like Sherry was saying, to look at the framework requirements and kind of decipher what the SCF language is saying at all. So just a note there. Mapping, like, just this kind of process in general, it can be intimidating. But just kind of getting a start is so important. So you don't strive for perfection, just get started, see where things land, see what you can do. Um, it can be kind of tempting to just do everything in silos because the mapping exercise can seem just like too much work, too much time. But it does absolutely pay off. Once you have that mapping done and that single control set determined, so much easier to run, however many frameworks that you need. So yeah, and again, just having that understanding inventory of the controls that you have in place, of the risks that you have, so that you can properly kind of map and identify what needs to go where.
Yeah, and Tanya, by the way, it's easy for you because you do this
Sure.
all day, every day. So
Easier.
thank you for that
Yes.
clarification. But yes, when this is what you do all day, every day, it does seem to be very easy. But it is an extremely daunting task.
Yeah.
Even when it's easy, it's still a very daunting task, and there's a lot of nuances. But you brought up a good point. If you don't crosswalk them, if you don't do the mapping, if you don't create a single compliance program, you lose your ROI in the inefficiencies. You lose it in that you're not really being very good at mitigating risk. And then there's this whole alignment back to risk. And so it becomes very convoluted and complex. So this really is a very important thing. And then I like what else you said. When the next framework comes, and it will, or the
Mhm.
regulatory, you have something to fold it into. And then each one of them gets less and less daunting as you go because you're building and maintaining a program, and that's what you're doing. So that's great. Reporting, then you definitely want to analyze. You get your evidence review, talk to people, analyze that report. Again, we're back to reporting being so critically important. Why? Because reporting will contribute to the plan. If you don't have a plan, nothing's going to happen. If you don't have a plan, nothing's going to happen. That is the reality. Tanya, how many companies have you talked to that it's like, well, we did this and then he left, and well, then we did this, but we really didn't have a plan. And 3 years later, time we can never get back, expense, incredible waste of
Mhm.
money and time that you cannot get back, and it's still not done. So don't minimize how important the plan is. What else do you have to add, Tanya, in our wrapping up minutes here?
Things come up. It's easy to get distracted. Every day there's something new that gets thrown at all of us. But having that plan does help keep the focus where it needs to be.
Yep.
This is just like organizing anything else. I think about, this is going to make me sound so old, but like all the various supplements
Oh,
that I take. If I were to go into each bottle every night and like select, there's 5 or 6 different bottles and take those, the amount of time that that takes versus taking one day a week, organizing it into a little container and going day by day, that saves me so much time, effort.
great analogy.
I don't want to do it, when that day rolls around where I have to get everything organized, but it does pay off.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And just for the record, I buy 2 weeks worth. That way I have two pill
Nice.
boxes. So I do it
Nice.
twice a month, even better.
Nice.
Great analogy. Excellent analogy. So yes, a plan is so critically important. Plus, also in your analogy, there are the pills. If you had to pull them out of the original bottles every night, guess what? You'd forget. You'd be
Yep.
tired. You wouldn't feel like doing it. You'd miss a bottle or you'd grab multiple out of a bottle. It would be highly inaccurate. That's how companies are running their cybersecurity, unfortunately, versus being very crisp with the plan. And so this really is important. Plus, one person cannot do this by themselves. You are going to need other people to get this done. A plan helps to rally the troops and get you what you need from a resource standpoint. And then reporting helps to keep people engaged. Again, when you're adopting a new framework, do the pre-work, but ultimately you cannot grade your own paper. We see it all the time. I cannot say this more matter of factly, but you will have natural bias in your organization, most likely, unless you're like internal audit or someone that is independent within the organization, and that can work. But the reality is, get that outside help, that independent third-party assessment to when you think you're ready to go. We have a session coming up June 3rd about how to choose a GRC tool. A lot of what we've talked about, doing the assessment, doing the mapping, maintaining the program, reporting, a really solid GRC tool can help with that. And so we're doing a session because we get asked this question all the time. And then we also work with companies all the time that buy tools and tools and tools and tools and still never really get them fully implemented and off the ground. And so please register and join us for that session on June 3rd. It's going to be a lot of fun. So Tanya, in our final minutes here, and then we may have time for a question or so, what would you leave the audience with? If you could just leave, one kind of main point or, few main thoughts, what would you leave them
Sure.
with?
Yeah, I think the main takeaway, in my opinion, is kind of, face your fears. Um, it's intimidating to look at this, to figure out where everything aligns. It can be intimidating to even just look at the controls that you have in place. Like, kind of, I I don't want to see what's going on, but it brings so much clarity and kind of direction to have a goal, a plan, a framework to follow, an understanding of what's going on and what you need to do, and have that communication with the right folks, honest communication, so that you can improve and continue to improve. So you don't pigeonhole yourself into a check the box audit framework, what have you.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, many companies are understaffed, not staffed, wrongly staffed. We see a lot of
Mm,
that as well. And just wasting money hand over fist because this is a lot. And so you definitely want to have right staffing, whether it's internal or whether it's third party to come along and come alongside and help. You want to have right tooling, automate what can be automated, have the right tooling to build and implement and run it. It's definitely a people game. So much of cybersecurity is a people game, and so getting really good at engaging people across the organization, and then ultimately everything we do is about risk. Everything. Adopting a framework is about risk. It's about risk of losing revenue. If customers expect we have that framework, it's about risk of losing data or, worse, harming people, harming the organization. And so the framework is there to intend to help with that. And so go at it with the right approach and go at it with the right end game. And then remember it's a journey. So thank you, Tanya. It was really great
thank
insight.
you.
We have a really interesting question here. What's the best way to help convince executives to invest in cybersecurity maturity when compliance alone seems good enough? Okay, Tanya, what are your thoughts on that one? We never see that.
No, never.
Mm-mm, ever.
Um, that honest communication,
Hmm.
being, having that understanding of what's actually going on, and relaying that to the right folks, the right stakeholders, being honest, okay, compliance alone, you kind of break down the differences. Here's where compliance is, and here's the actual cybersecurity strategy or program that we have, and here's how it's actually performing. Um, yeah, the two are not making it clear that they're not just one and the same, and just communicating where the actual deficiencies are and how that impacts the org, like you said, how that impacts reputational impact, customer impact, all of that. It's got a huge impact to the org.
Yeah, I would just, that's excellent. I would just add risk. You got to
Hmm.
learn to speak in the language of risk.
Yep.
It's good enough, but that means our risk is still high is when it's good enough if they
Yep.
think that. So you learn to articulate, no, our risk is still here, and here's why, and here's what we need to do to start managing and bringing this thing down. Excellent. Thank you so much. We do have some
You.
upcoming sessions. Definitely check those out on the website. You can see them there on the screen. There's also some ones that have passed. Those are posted on the website as well so that you can go and watch those at your leisure. Hotman Group, we also work with companies. We do a complimentary health check of your program. So reach out to us if you think that is something that would be helpful to your organization. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Please reach out to us on LinkedIn. Tanya, really appreciate your time today, your
You so
amazing
much.
insight. Thank you so much. And everybody have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.